Joining us now, one of our favorite people, Fareed Zakaria from CNN. Fareed, thanks for coming back on. Every time you're on, there's like a list of things I want to ask you about, and we're going to talk about the CNN special that I know that is coming up. But just to start, I was watching you, maybe it was last weekend, and I almost emailed you, and I thought, let me not bother him with an email about this question that's naive. But you were talking about the nuclear sword rattling from Putin, and how with desperation, this is, something that we all have to think about around the world. And you commented about if he were to use nuclear weapons, there would be a response that is equal. What does that mean? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so this is a big problem, which is what do you do? The peace in the world rests on something called MAD, which sounds weird, but it's mutually assured destruction.
Right.
So the idea is the Russians have these crazy nuclear weapons that can reach the US and wipe out whole cities. And the reason they don't use them is because we have the same missiles and we would be able to fire them at the Russians. So that kind of deters each other. Unfortunately, the Russians also have some very small nuclear weapons, which they could use. They're called tactical nuclear weapons, which they could use on the battlefield in Ukraine if they felt like their backs were against the wall, if they felt like they were losing, they had no option. So the question becomes, what do you do about that? Let's say, they use a nuclear weapon. It doesn't destroy a whole city, but it crosses that bar of no use of nuclear weapons that has been in place for 75 years. It's devastating. It does cause a lot of radiation. Those blocks in the city would be uninhabitable probably for years, kind of Chernobyl-like thing. So the US military, I believe, on the basis of the reporting I've done, is thinking of not responding with a nuclear attack of our own. So sort of sending the signal the Russians can behave irresponsibly, we won't, but instead to do a kind of devastating conventional strike. So to give you an example, one thing the US military could do was, an air campaign that would just destroy every Russian troop position in Ukraine, which would essentially end the war. The Ukrainians would then basically just walk through those positions, take over that land. So I think that's a smart way to think about it, because and the Biden administration is doing it smartly, because what you're saying to the Russians is if you do that, the war's over.
We'll end it.
Ukraine wins.
We'll end it. So the other thing I wanted to get your reaction to are the protests in Iran after the death of the woman by the police there. We've seen those protests. Where do you think this goes?
So far the best rule, sadly, has been to bet that repression works. That if you're really willing to use force, think about Syria, think about Russia, think about China. The people at the end of the day, totally understandably, people don't want to die. They've got families to look after. But what I have to say is the bravery of these women is just amazing. You get jailed for not wearing your headscarf in Iran. And these women are saying, publicly, and they're videotaping themselves and they're going out. So what I think they're trying to do is to force a debate within the regime that says, we got to drop this requirement. But the problem is it's been so central to the regime and to the ideology of control, but maybe they'll find a crack here in the regime.
We hope so.
Yeah.
It's tough to see. Fareed Zakaria with us. Got a new CNN special, Supreme Power Inside the Highest Court in the Land. What's the purpose of this one?
I think one of the things that worries me most about America these days is we don't believe in anything. We don't have faith in anything. We don't have faith in the Congress, the presidency, big companies, big media, big tech, right? One of the few things that we all respected was the Supreme Court. It used to be like the Army, the Supreme Court, maybe the Federal Reserve, right? Like at this point, you're left with very few things that you respect. And the Supreme Court, what I was struck by was this Gallup poll, 75% of Americans, 3 out of every 4 Americans say they no longer have confidence in the Supreme Court. And I sort of tried to understand why. And I guess the short answer is the court has been behaving in very political ways not judicial legal ways. Everybody understands the court will come to decisions that you don't agree with, but you always thought it was because the judges were using their legal reasoning to come up with where they came up with. But over the last decade, I would say it has seemed as though somehow the Supreme Court finds itself endorsing and supporting and helping every conservative cause that the Republican Party has been championing. So it makes you wonder, wait, is this just politics? Are they all just conservative Republicans and they are just doing what the Donald Trump told them to do? Or do they actually have a kind of judicial temperament?
Interesting to see all of it in the special coming up. One of the great thinkers on our planet, Fareed Zakaria, with us. It's a CNN special, Supreme Power Inside the Highest Court in the Land. And if you get a chance to see him on the weekends, I just really look forward to your take on things when you open your show and you give your perspective and your view. It's so insightful. And for me, it's really the best part of that hour.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
Good to see you again, pal. Be well.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You got to watch his show on Sundays on CNN.